Hi, I'm Steve Castile. Welcome to The Hour. Today we're having a visit with one of the most extraordinary people you will ever meet. Stay tuned.
You are watching The Hour, time that makes the difference. The United Methodist Hour is made possible by the generous prayer and financial support of viewers like you. Thanks for watching. And now, here's your host, Steve Castile.
Welcome back. Today we're here in Moore's Bicycle Shop, a unique repurposing of a church where once there was worship and singing in a baptistry, now there's seats and handlebars and gears. The cool thing is that even though this is not a church, it's a sanctuary for a lot of people. A lot of folks coming here seeking recreation, seeking status, seeking a lot of things, and they're always greeted with a staff who is there to serve and to meet their needs. I love coming here. I have a bicycle that came from here that was a very special gift to me when I was serving pedal and left that ministry. And today we're going to spend some time with Moore's bike shop owner, James Moore, as he shares a story that will not only dig into your soul, but I think open your eyes and give you a perspective that you probably never had before. So I hope you'll stay tuned. But before we hear that incredible story and meet Jim, I want you to take a moment and let's have a classic revisit to Keith Tonkel and the International Lesson Series.
Well, hey, dear friends, bless your hearts. We talk about Joshua leading Israel today. No one ever leads anyone else without being a good follower. There are a lot of people that want to be up front. They want to be outstanding. They want to be good leaders. But a good leader is always a follower. And in the sense of the teaching of Jesus, a good leader is something else, servant. There's some people that become very caught up in their own dignity, or their own degrees, or their own achievements. But the minute that we forget to do simple acts of loving and godly service, we miss the power that is assigned to us as persons of faith and as leaders in the whole life of God's community. This is that particular passage of Scripture in Joshua chapter 3, where they're camped out at Shittim, and they go across the Jordan, and they want to know if Joshua has what it takes to be a real leader. And the key verse for today sort of sums it up. The Lord said to Joshua, this is verse 7 of chapter 3, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all the people of Israel, so that they might know that I am with you, as I was with Moses." The question of authority to me has always been a very significant and a very important question. And the whole thing with regard to the authority that God has for us, for you and for me, comes out of our willingness to minister, out of our willingness to serve, out of our willingness to follow. How did Moses become the great leader? By his willingness to serve, by his willingness to minister, and by his commitment to follow. If we will follow the will of God as we understand it, if we will follow the Spirit of Christ as it's made known to us, then as God used Moses and as God used Joshua, so God can use persons just like you and like me too. Can you take that? Can you let that take you? And can, in service, you find your way to lead at least someone as Joshua came to lead Israel? Bless your dear hearts.
Wow, Keith is always a classic, and this shop is full of classic bicycles. I come in and I always look around the upper rail and see what's there. We were talking earlier, Jim has a great hot wheel that he rides in parades and shares with the community. Jim had a tragedy in his life, as many of us do. And the way he has engaged that tragedy and the passion in which he has run towards the issue at the center has affected a lot of lives. He has spoken at countless places, and including in conjunction with some of the governor's opioid community hearings, and has left the people who have heard him affected deeply. And I think once you begin to hear him speak, you'll understand. Today is the first of a two-part series. Today, he will tell you about his son Jeffrey and the tragedy that changed the course of his life. And then next week we'll come back and talk about a strategy and and an event and a vision of walking into an issue that affects all of us. Let's listen in as James tells his story.
I'm James Moore. I'm the father of Jeffrey Moore and Jenny Moore and my wife Jan. Our son Jeff began having some problems in junior high school, some learning disabilities. Was diagnosed with those and put on some prescription medications to try to help him focus. Unfortunately, about that time, he also discovered some friends who were using marijuana and began exchanging pills at school. We got Jeff some help over the summer before going into high school and a short stay in a treatment facility. We felt like things were on an even keel at that point. But as he began high school, he began to fall further behind and have more difficulty. And the difficulty was not just in the substance use. There were just some emotional, troubling times that he had, and that caused him to begin to miss some school and fall further behind. He eventually did graduate to high school, and at that time I felt like my wife also deserved a diploma for all the work that she did catching him up and keeping him in school. He started Jones Junior College for a 2-year program to get a certification in computers, and did well for the first year. Decided to move to Texas with his girlfriend to go to school there in Houston, and seemed to be doing well there. And we were really happy when they announced that they were going to come back to Hattiesburg and finish school and be close to us again. Jeff began working in the family business, the bicycle shop, and he was such an incredible worker. He was the kind of person that could talk to the college professor that drove up in a Saab that wanted to spend $5,000 on a bike to put on top of the car just because it looked good. He could also talk to the person who showed up before we opened with a flat tire that needed to get to his job at Burger King so he didn't lose his job. And that there are few people that can instantly communicate with that wide a range of personalities as Jeff did. As Jeff was working at the bike shop, I began to notice that he seemed to still have some issues that appeared to be addiction related. It was in 2015 when he came to Jan and myself and confided in us that he needed help. We took him to a local doctor who got him into the ER, and they recommended detox. And Jeff didn't want to do detox because he'd been in school for 7 years at this point, working on that 2-year degree because he had changed his topic a couple of times. And he was just a few weeks away from graduation. Being a victim of this disease, he had used every second chance he had been given. He had used every day that he could possibly miss. And he said, "Dad, if I miss any school, I won't get to graduate." And I assured him that if he would do the 5 days of detox, that I would walk him back into his classroom and he would graduate. And he did the detox, and I got him back in school, and a few weeks later he did graduate. The amazing thing to me is that under the weight of addiction to heroin, he was injecting heroin at the time, his final semester he made the dean's list as he graduated. I don't know how a person manages to do that, but he did. After the detox, he began seeing a counselor, but it was just a matter of months before we noticed his behavior change through working at the bike shop. And things were getting worse. And it was complicated by the fact that Jenny, his older sister, was also his manager. So we had the family dynamics in the workplace, which can be tricky. But Jeff came to us again, well, we came to him and said, you know, something's got to give. This is not working. We've done all that we can do. We think that you need more help. And he agreed to go into a local 90-day inpatient program here. And that was a tough decision for him because his fiance had left him at that time. And it was just Jeff and his 2 dogs, Ziggy and Teddy. And he loved those dogs as much as he loved people. I assured him I would take care of the dogs, would visit them several times a day. He made the decision to admit himself into this program. We were not able to visit him for the first few weeks. That's just the policy of most treatment facilities. On our first visit, we went. I noticed he'd put on quite a few pounds, and I checked ourselves in. We had 4 hours. And immediately I thought about Ziggy and Teddy as dogs, and I told Jan, I says, I'm gonna run out, get us some food, I'll be right back. So I went through a drive-through, got some food, but I went to his house and picked up Ziggy and Teddy. and carried them back to the facility. And we sat outside for 4 hours at a picnic table with Jeff holding Ziggy and Teddy as we began to catch up and talk and see his progress. Over the next few weeks, we would visit every Saturday for the full 4 hours, and it didn't happen immediately, but we began to notice a softening. The anger began to melt, and Jeff clearly was with the program. He was beginning to have some hope that he had not had for his future in a long time. 60 days into the 90-day program, I received a call from Jeff informing me that he had incurred his 4th behavioral violation and was being ejected from the facility, and that I needed to come and pick him up. Jan and I were devastated. As parents, we had finally begun to discover what sleep was like, sleep that we had not had for 10 years during this roller coaster ride of his addiction. I picked him up at the lobby of the facility, loaded his stuff in the car, yelled at him, cursed at him, accused him once again of putting self above family. He sat silently as we drove home to have yet another family meeting that we've had many times over. We tried to get him into another facility that same day so he could complete his 90 days that he had committed to us for. Was unable to do that due to some insurance issues. And the next day he decided that he did not want to go back into a facility, but he felt that he could do this on his own, going to meetings every day, going to a therapist regularly. So as a family, we decided that he would stay with us, eat with us, work with me, and at the same time go to meetings at least once a day and go to the job center seeking his own full-time job so he would be more self-sufficient and out on his own. And that worked really good for about a week. It's a week that I have very fond memories of. There was an essence of hope in Jeffrey that he had not had for a long time. There was honesty between us that we had not seen in a long time. And it was just good to be in that place in our lives. On the 8th day, when I called to see if he wanted to have lunch with me, his phone went unanswered. I checked immediately with my wife, who had just spoken to him, so I was not concerned. At the end of the day, when I went home, I asked how the meeting went with Jeff, and she said he never showed. And we immediately got in the car and went over to Jeff's house where he was with Ziggy and Teddy. Ziggy and Teddy met me at the door, and they led me through the kitchen into the living room where Jeff was on the sofa. I called 911. I followed the instructions that they gave me, but having been a part-time police officer in the past, I knew that what I was doing was too late. So at that point, I had the strangest thought when I saw him laying there. Just the thought was, it's over, in a way that his struggling is over. The hell that he went through for so long is over, and he's at peace, at least at this point. So what I have tried to do since, we went through several months of just a stunned sense of shock. And over the months, as that begins to subside, it never goes away, but it subsides. And then you're able to have the courage to start going through the photo albums, looking at the old family movies. I joined a group of folks who had also lost children to a number of means, a group of grieving parents, and I met with them once a month. And that group was very helpful to me, but I also discovered that there were people who were not processing grief in a way that was beneficial to them or to their families. And at that point I made the decision that I did not want my life to be defined by my son's death, but I wanted it to be inspired by his life. And I made the commitment to try to live a life that Jeff was no longer able to live in a way that would help those that he thought a lot of, that were his friends, that I knew that were still living the life of active addiction. And it's at that point that I began to advocate for those suffering for this brain disorder. I remember driving through town one day on the road that I would always go to every morning when I would go to have breakfast with him. And I had a photograph in the car that was important to me because it's a photograph that Jeff took. After his first detox, in one of his periods of sobriety, We went to the Georgia mountains for a 3-day family vacation, just Jeff, my wife, and myself. And it was such a good experience because Jeff was completely sober and he was in an environment away from all the influences that could cause him harm. There were no dealers that he knew there. There was no influences there that would be harmful for him. And it was just the 3 of us having a good time. What we wanted to do on that trip was to do a little hiking. And so Jan stayed at the cabin to read, and Jeff and I discovered some mountain trails and went out and took a pretty good hike up one. And up near the top, we began to see the distant views. And Jeff said, "Stop, Dad, let's get a picture." And he pulled out his phone and took a selfie of us. And that's the picture that I have carried around with me and in my car. And I'm driving down the main road in town and I'm looking at that picture, and I suddenly get so angry that I was not the parent that I should have been. So angry that as a community, we view those with this disease as moral failures, that I thought, I'd like to put this up on a billboard. And the thought came to mind of the civil rights story of Miss Emmett Till when her son was so brutally murdered up in the Delta. She refused to have a closed coffin service because she wanted the world to see the damage that was done to her son through misunderstanding and through hatred. And it was sort of in that same light that I wanted the world to see that this was my son, that I was very proud of him, and that we need to find a better way to address this affliction, this disease. I went to a local billboard company manager and sat down with him, and I asked what it would cost if I were to have a few billboards erected using this image of my son and myself. And the guy was very compassionate. He looked at the picture and he says, "If you'll pay for the printing of the billboards, anytime there's a vacancy, I'll put one up." And those billboards came up almost immediately around town, and they were up for over a year at different places. And it was those billboards that opened so many doors for me to come and begin to talk to people about this disease. I was approached by so many people who had lived the life of addiction and had now found long-term recovery. And they were just so thankful that someone was beginning to realize that this was not a behavioral choice. This was not a behavioral failing. It was not a sin. It was not a moral issue. It may have started out through a series of bad choices, but as the brain began to be changed by these chemicals, it quickly became a brain disorder, one that is very difficult to live with and difficult to overcome, but it's clearly overcomable by the fact that these people are now raising families, working at jobs, and contributing to our community. I went to the treatment facility that had ejected Jeff. I obviously had a lot of bitterness over that. He never failed a drug test, but it was a series of rule violations that caused them to discharge him prematurely. And I went first to advocate for changes in that policy. I wanted a policy where no one ever would be put out on the street again for manifesting signs of the symptoms of the disease for which they admitted themselves to be treated. And we actually had a long discussion, myself and the leaders of the treatment facility. And at the end of the discussion, I added as an afterthought, you know, if there's any opportunity where my perspective as a father, the things I did right and the things I did wrong could be of value to your families that are going through this program, I'd be happy to come and talk. And I was very surprised that they took me up on that. And so once a week, I go and speak to the families and the patients in one of the 2 treatment facilities in town here. And I've learned so much from them, from the patients that are going through this program, the struggles they have, and the families. What I try to convince these families is to look at this as the medically proven disease that it is. It is not a behavioral issue. It's not something that your child or your loved one did to hurt you. It's something that they're doing because at this point they think they must do it to survive. It's as important to them as food. And if I'm able to simply create a little bit more room for compassion in the minds of those there to support their loved ones, I feel like I've done something in honor of Jeff's life. After Jeff died, Jan and I spent many long evenings out at restaurants. After the meal was done, after the tables were cleared, we would sit there for a long time just trying to absorb what had happened to our family. And I said, you know, it really frustrates me that if he had died from cancer, there would be multiple events in this community that we could go out, wear a t-shirt with his name, release balloons, light candles for him. Had it been diabetes, had it been a birth defect, so many things, his life would be honored publicly along with many others who had died from that particular disease. I said, but there's nothing here that celebrates the life of those lost to this disease. And I said, you know, I wonder what would happen if we were to hold an event just for that purpose, to honor the courage of the addict, even those who did not succeed, but those who lived as courageously as they could and succumbed. And her answer was, no one would come because they're too ashamed, they're too embarrassed. And I said, so many people have come up to us after Jeff died and said, oh, that's in our family too. We've all been bothered by that. You know, it's hit every family. I said, perhaps if they saw an opening, they would do that and step out. And if we could fill a room with people coming out to honor those suffering from this disease, it might begin to erase the stigma and make it easier for those still living in the shadows to step out and seek treatment. And so we held such an event. We called it Tribute to Courage. And we invited people from the faith community to come and speak about grief, to speak about the struggle, to speak about addiction. And I invited a USM professor, Dr. Echeverria, that is an addiction specialist. And he gave the greatest example when he spoke to the group. He said, first of all, there's no discussion about whether this is a disease or not. I mean, that's a conclusion. It causes measurable, visible changes in the brain that you can see on a scan. And those changes that take place in the brain of the addict are not that different from the changes that take place in the brain of the Parkinson's patient or the Alzheimer's patient. But you would never go up to your Uncle Bob at the table, whose Parkinson is causing him to drop food on the floor, and shake him and tell him to cut it out. You would never go up to Grandma and slap her because she can't recall your name as quick as you think that she ought to be able to do it. But we have a much less compassionate approach to those who have the disorder of addiction. And so that's what I'm trying to get those who are dealing with this in their families, who are being frustrated daily by the thefts, the lying, the disappearing, the long nights wondering if that person's okay. Try to understand that while this started out as a series of bad choices, it quickly evolves to where the bad choices are a symptom of this disease and not a cause of the disease. And to give the same compassion that we would give to someone with any other disease. And cancer is a good example. Just because the cancer patient may have made some bad choices early in life that caused that cancer, we don't continue to harbor that against that individual. We come around and give them as much support and as much love. We hold fundraisers and support them in every way that we can. And if that cancer returns, we do the same thing over and over again as often as it takes to see them through recovery. And that's what I want as a community, for us to begin to look at this disease as any other disease and bring the same level of compassion to it that we bring to any other disease.
I don't think there are any words that I can use that speak more clearly than Jim's words already, other than as we get ready to listen to LaToya talk about Your Ministry Matters, I want you to hear the power of what he said. People can make a difference. People with a passion can change things. Let's listen to LaToya.
Greetings. Marcus and I were flying from California to Mississippi recently, and we had to kind of go out over the LA coastline, and we had to fly over the Pacific Ocean for about 10 or 15 minutes. Now, we were flying in a Boeing like 700 series, so basically this huge plane. There were like 3 rows of 3 seats, so it's huge, very high tech, all sorts of things on the windows. You didn't even pull the shade up and down. You pressed a button and you could make the tint on the window darker or lighter. So if you've ridden on a plane with the shades, it was just a mind-blowing experience. This huge plane with all sorts of things that I hadn't even thought about on a plane before. And wow, we just felt like we were in such a big, powerful machine. But you know what? when I looked out that window and looked into that water and looked into that huge Pacific Ocean, I realized how small that little plane was. It felt huge to me, and how much smaller even I was. And as we're in this new year and we're thinking about what we want to do this year, it helped me think, you know what? I read that over half of people's New Year's resolutions fail. So what can we do differently? Instead of thinking about the things that I can do that take a lot of effort from me, oh, I'm going to lose 15 pounds, which means I have to get up and go to the gym every day. What if I think bigger? What if I think about myself as the little thing that I am, and about God as the huge thing that He is, like that Pacific Ocean? What if I listen to Him and I say, God, what do you want from me this year? And I think about that huge thing that only He can do. What if I let Him inspire me with something that's huge, that can only happen through His miraculous, divine, powerful intervention? You know what? That takes a little more faith, but I bet you my odds will go up if I do that. So that's what I've been doing this year. I've been praying and I've been saying, God, you bless me with that big thing that I want to do this year, that big thing that I want to be, that requires me to have faith in you. And you know what? When that thing happens, you know I'm going to tell y'all about it. That's going to be my testimony, because you know what I always say. Testifying is a ministry. Believing is a ministry. And letting somebody know that you believed in God and He came through, that's a ministry. And your ministry, my friends, matters.
Thanks, Latoya. You know, as we close out the show today, I want to say a couple of things. First, tune in next week. Jim is going to share more about the way he really took a hold of this challenge that rocked his family and tried to do something about it. We're going to talk about an event called Road to Recovery that's coming up on the 24th of March. And we're also just going to challenge you that if you have somebody who is wrestling with this disease, then maybe you invite them to watch next week. There's no way they won't be affected. And if there's somebody you want to see today's session, then have them go to the hour.org and watch the archive show in the convenience of their home, and maybe it might spark a conversation that begins the process of healing. We thank you so much for tuning in, and pray as always that you will live loved.